All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on what time zone you're in. Welcome to the Summer 15 Developer Preview Release webinar. We've got a jam-packed hour full of demos and great content for you coming up in the next hour, and we've cherry-picked what we think are the sweetest new features out of Summer 15 release notes. Now, if you're asking who are the voices behind the computer, well, my name's Samantha Reddy. I'm a developer evangelist here at Salesforce. Joining me this morning is Peter Chittum, another fellow developer evangelist all the way from across the pond in the UK, and Eric Jacobson, the Senior Director of Product Management. Say hi, guys.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Peter. All right. So, safe harbor statement, no Salesforce presentation would be complete without this one. What this is basically saying is that this is a preview webinar, and we definitely will be making some forward-looking statements throughout the next hour, but to please base your buying and purchasing decisions off of currently existing products. And because we are a social business and business is social, you can find us on all of these different social networks. So please follow our Twitter handles at Salesforce Devs to find out about other cool events, webinars, and blog articles, a lot of great content coming out. And as well as our Facebook group, Google Plus, and LinkedIn are another great channel for getting that information. If you have any questions for us and you want to tweet at us, join the conversation, hashtag Summer15Developers is what we're going to be monitoring to be able to interact with you directly during the webinar. And then this webinar is being recorded, so if you can't make it to the end, you can find it on our YouTube channel later, along with all of our previous webinars that we've done and some Dreamforce sessions as well. Now, if you have any questions, as I mentioned, this hashtag Summer15Developers is a great way to ask that question now, as well as inside the chat panel. We also have a success community. You can get to it using this bit.ly link to be able to ask questions on the success community. We also will be doing a live Q&A at the very end, so stick around if you want to hear answers to those questions that you put in the chat window. All right, so starting off is going to be Eric Jacobson to tell us what's cool around UI. Eric, why don't you show me something cool?
Awesome, thanks, Sam. We've got something really exciting to share with you guys today, and that is that the Lightning App Builder, which is something that we introduced to you guys for the first time last fall at Dreamforce, is going GA. So it is now generally available in Summer 15, which means that you can now build mobile apps for your phone and your tablet easier than ever before. You can do them with clicks without writing a line of code. But for all the developers on the line, don't worry. There's some great opportunities to write code, but I'm going to make you more productive than ever before because I'm going to show you things that you can do that you don't have to write code for. So you can very quickly and easily composite your applications, drag and drop using custom Lightning components as well as our standard components here. And so this is some really exciting announcement for us. We're thrilled to be able to bring this power into our customers' hands to make it accessible to a wide range of users, from admins to business analysts to developers and all of the above. And to give you an idea of some of the types of applications that you can create using the App Builder, you're going to create apps that are going to run inside the Salesforce One mobile container. So on your iPhone, your iPad, your Android device, your mobile browser, you're all going to be able to access these applications here. And you're going to build what are effectively single-screen applications within the App Builder, but they are able to drill in and look at more data. So, for example, if I'm building an application that's showing me a list of leads, I can tap on one of those leads and drill into some of my standard lead information that's already available to me in Salesforce One. So I've got all that power right at my fingertips there. And I can build great point applications, which will be tailored solutions to specific business problems. It's a great way to ensure productivity of your users and allow them to accomplish the task at hand, move on and do the next thing that they need to get done. Now, the way that apps are constructed is that an app that you build using the Lightning App Builder consists of a Lightning page. And a Lightning page is made up of a series of Lightning components. Seems pretty straightforward there. And then additionally, we have the ability to add in global actions. And this gives you a lot of power because those global actions can do a wide variety of things. You can tap into some global actions that'll go and create records for you. You can then take that action and attach a process to it. Using the Lightning Process Builder, you can actually attach a process to that action, and you can do some incredible things there. So you can build some really rich interactive applications there. Now, any of the apps that you build using the Lightning App Builder here are automatically responsive. And what this means is that you build a single application, and we'll take care of the work of making it work properly across your phone and tablet devices. And in fact, even handling if you take your tablet device and rotate it into landscape orientation, in particular on an iPad or a mobile browser on a tablet. And the way we do this is through the use of responsive templates. So when you create an app using the App Builder, you'll have the ability to select a template. There's now 4 templates available to you in the Summer 15 release, and these create a series of regions that you can use to hold those components. And it takes care of automatically then rearranging those regions depending on the device that you're using it on. But components are the real star of the show here. They are the building blocks of these applications. And what makes the Lightning platform so exciting is that we've got a rich ecosystem of components. So components fall into 2 broad categories in the sense that they can either be fine-grained components, say like a button or a text field, that you're going to want to work with programmatically to build up and create what we call coarse-grained components, which are nice big modules that you're able to work with declaratively, place on your application, perhaps specify a couple of configuration attributes, and you're good to go there. Now, as far as those coarse-grained components, you've got a few different options. So there's standard components. These are ones that are going to be provided to you by Salesforce. They're good. They're ready to go. The moment you load up the App Builder, they're there waiting for you. Then you've got the ability as developers to create your own custom components. You can go in through the developer console. I'll show you a brief little bit of that later on in the demo. You can use Eclipse or your favorite text editor, and you can actually create your own custom Lightning component using our Lightning framework, using a combination of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then on the back end using Apex as your back end server-side logic. You can create your own components. And then if you don't feel like creating your own component, or if you've created such a great component that you actually want to share it with the world, that's where AppExchange fits into the equation. And we now have the ability with AppExchange to publish components. So you'll see the first of the components that are now available to you on the AppExchange. You can download and install those right into your org, and you're good to go. Now, the standard components that we provide for you in this GA release of the App Builder, there are 5 standard components there. It may seem like a relatively small set, but they're pretty rich multifunctional components there, so you can build some pretty rich applications. For example, that filter list component there actually allows you to tap into any of your saved shared filter lists for virtually any standard or custom object. So you can do some really powerful things with it. You've got a recent items component that you can tune in to which objects you want to track recently viewed records of. Report charts will give you the ability to quickly create a dashboard by pulling charts off of your reports. And then that Visualforce page component, that one's a real great one because it lets you tap into any of your existing mobile-enabled Visualforce pages. And I think Sam's going to show us some pretty exciting things later on in the webinar where we can do some new cool things with Visualforce that you may just want to use inside your Lightning apps here. And certainly, as you can imagine, over time, we will be working to add more standard components to the App Builder. Talking just again a little bit about those custom components, we have made a couple of enhancements in the Summer 15 release that I want to call your attention to. The first of those is if you're exposing your components to the App Builder, you now have the ability to have your attributes use pick lists. So you can define a static pick list of values that will present itself as a drop-down list when you are exposing those attributes in the App Builder. And I'll show you that in a bit more specifics in just a couple minutes. And then also, we've made some improvements to the referential integrity validation to ensure that the framework is robust and that you're not going to have any issues that your component is, for example, referencing an object, and if somebody were to try and go and delete that object, we've got checks in place to help make sure that doesn't happen now. And this even includes explicit dependencies from the or a dependency tag within your component there. So just a little bit more enhancements to the framework to make it just that much more robust. Now, rather than talk to you to even more slides about this, I'd much rather bring you in and let's take a look at the Lightning App Builder in practice here. So you can see I'm logged into my Summer 15 org here. This is an org that I've got set up here. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the Lightning App Builder, and we're going to go ahead and create a new application. So we'll quickly get to a quick splash screen will pop up here telling us that we're going to create new apps for Salesforce 1 by creating Lightning pages. And remember I mentioned that the apps are responsive, so we have a series of different templates that we can choose from. So we can choose from a 1-column, a 2-column. I'm actually going to pick the 3-column template here because it actually gives me a variety of different presentations from my phone to my portrait tablet and my landscape tablet. It actually gives me 3 columns across there. So we'll pick that one. And now let's say I want to create a business tracker application. I'm going to call it Biz Tracker. And you'll see my app builder loads up here. And on the left-hand side, I have my list of components. So I have my standard components, followed by my custom components, and then lastly, my custom managed components. I just want to briefly call out the difference there. Basically, if your component comes from a managed package, say from AppExchange, it'll show up in that custom managed section. If it's a component that you've built locally in your org here, then it's going to show up just in the custom section. And then lastly, at the bottom there, you see is that link to get more components on the AppExchange. If I were to tap that, it'll actually bring up AppExchange. It'll show us some of the packages of components that are now available. You can certainly expect to see more here in coming days. We're hard at work at getting some more components available to you. And I'm going to start building my application by dragging and dropping these components here on my design canvas. I can tell it that I want to see what the app's going to look like as a tablet application. So I've got my 3 columns here. And I'm going to start by grabbing a third-party component here called the Opportunity Health Check. And that'll give me a view of my opportunities. You can see I've got some different options for it there. Maybe I don't want it to show the list view picker. I'm going to grab a map component here that's another third-party component that lets me see my leads on a map. And then lastly, I've got an additional component that I want to bring on, which is a heat map component. So a slightly different take on a map, but in this case, it's actually tuned in and it's showing me my accounts on a state-by-state basis here. And I could bring in I could also bring in some of my standard components as well. For example, if I want to see all of my accounts, I could do that just as easily by bringing in one of those filter list components there. Now, the other thing that I want to do before I publish this application is I want to give it a little bit of that interactive functionality. So I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of quick actions to this application here. I'm going to click over to my page properties, and I'm going to very quickly add a couple of actions. Since this is a business tracker, maybe I want the ability to keep track of new leads and new opportunities. That'll be pretty good. We'll go ahead and add those. Now, in order to get this application deployed to my mobile device, you may be thinking that we've got a big, arduous task in front of us. You know, going to have to get the IT department involved. We're going to have to write some provisioning scripts for our mobile devices. No, how about I hit the save button? That'll save the metadata for my application. And the only other thing I need to do is click this activate button here, which is going to allow me to provision it into my mobile navigation. So I get to pick a tab icon. So we can go ahead here and we can decide what icon we want to use for our application. We'll pick this little office building. It's kind of businessy. And we can pick where we want it to appear in our navigation here for stage left in Salesforce 1. I'm going to put it right up there in the top, right beneath my feed, and then I'm going to hit activate. And that's all I had to do to publish my mobile application.
So when you say publish, you mean that is deployed to production that easily?
That is deployed to production. To show you just how easy it is, in fact, let me go over here and let's bring up my iPad. So you can see now I've got my iPad logged into the Salesforce 1 mobile application. I'm going to bring up and update the stage left navigation menu there for us. And there's our Biz Tracker application. It appeared just like that.
That is awesome.
We'll tap on that. And you can see now, here's the application loading in. We've got our list of opportunities over on the left. We've got our accounts. We could actually drill in if we wanted to see the details of one of those accounts. So you can see there, if I want to see more information about the Global Hippos account, I could see that information right there at my fingertips. But remember, I mentioned also this was a responsive application. So for example, we're looking at it in a landscape orientation right now. If I were to simply just rotate my iPad here, you'll see that the screen will update, and it should give it to us in a 2-column view. Just a second for the screen to update there. There you go. And you see now it's actually changed to a 2-column view. If I were to be looking at this on my iPhone, it actually would have consolidated everything down into a 1-column view.
Wow, Eric. So I think that Lightning App Builder is just so cool, not only because you're able to build these apps so quickly, but also, I mean, it really allows the developer and the admin to be able to work separately and independently, but still be able to work together. I noticed earlier when you were configuring that sidebar there, like an admin would be able to go in and change those things very easily, but how does that affect the developer? Where are the developer touch points?
That's a great question, and I think the way we can look at that is let's take a look at a specific component. So let's look at this accounts by state component. What you can see here is the developer has gone and made this very easy for the admin to consume. For example, they can decide what object do they want to plot on that map. Do I want to see accounts, or maybe I want to see leads, and it'll actually pick a different set of data. How does that work? So the way that works is within the definition of the component. So if I were to go over here and switch over to my developer console, you see I'm now going to open up that map chart component. And what I want to point out is that a few things here within the design file. So remember I mentioned that you have the ability now that you can specify a data source attribute in your design file. So what you'll see here now is, for example, in the entity attribute here in our design file, you'll see that we then specify a data source. And that data source basically provides a comma-separated list of values that we want to appear inside the drop-down list inside the app builder there. So if you have a string attribute, it automatically configure itself using a pick list by specifying a data source attribute. And in fact, you can even take it a step further. If you want to gather multiple values, if you make it a string array attribute, it'll actually bring up a multi-value pick list selector there that will allow you to pick multiple of those values in a drag and drop type of fashion.
Wow, that's really great. I mean, I'm really excited to see what people build with Lightning App Builder along with Lightning Components, because it seems like those two go together really well.
Me too. I can't wait. I think we're at the embarkation of some really new and exciting development there. We're empowering not just developers but citizen developers to create apps on our platform, and I couldn't be more excited about that. To kind of just recap and give a little bit of a reminder as to the release status, the app builder, the Lightning App Builder, which was what we just looked at, which creates apps for mobile apps to be used within the Salesforce 1 container, is GA in summer 15. Lightning Components, if you want to use Lightning Components to create custom Lightning apps, so outside of the Salesforce 1 container, say for example you want to have an app that's hosted on our platform, but it's myapp.app, you can build that now using Lightning Components as well. That is also GA. However, the capabilities that we were looking at there using custom Lightning Components within a app built in the app builder or in any form inside of Salesforce 1, that remains a beta in summer 15. So that's just one last thing to keep in mind there.
All right.
And with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Sam, who's going to talk a bit more about some of the other parts of the platform and some of the other exciting things that we have got for you in summer 15.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Eric. I want to talk about now Visualforce, our other framework for being able to build custom UIs on top of Salesforce. Now, first off, I want to start with critical updates because I think these will affect a lot of people that are already building Visualforce pages or have existing Visualforce pages in their orgs now. First off, Apex no longer has any unfiltered access to the user object if you're using the with sharing keyword, if you have the specific org sharing rules set up for the user object. So if you are using with sharing within your orgs, which I hope that you are, please check into your sharing rules around the user object to make sure that won't affect anything you're using in Apex. In addition to that, we're going to start serving static resources directly from the Visualforce domain. And so this shouldn't change too much around your Visualforce pages if you're already using the $resource or relative URLs to access those resources. But if you're using absolute URLs anywhere, be sure to check to make sure you change those from the Salesforce domain to Visualforce. And then finally, the page reference or the methods that are using the page reference class for get content and get content as PDF are now going to behave as callouts. So this is going to improve the semantics of your transaction for calling the page. Because these calls are going to be tracked against the limits of the calling transaction, so making it a little bit faster and a little bit easier for you there. Now beyond that, Visualforce has a few new mapping components that have been added to that standard library. So last release, we had the ability to create a map very easily in Visualforce using the Google Maps API and get that rich map based off of some sort of address functionality into Visualforce without having to import these external JavaScript libraries. But now you can enhance those maps even further by adding map markers and info windows based off of either Visualforce data, HTML, CSS, what have you, within those JavaScript maps without actually having to use any external components. This is especially ideal if you're using, say, the standard controller, or embedding this within a record detail page and you want to get a map built very quickly. Moving right along onto Apex, I'm going to show a demo of what I just mentioned, but paired with the Apex peanut butter to my Visualforce jelly. Apex has a new SOQL capability to be able to add location and distance variables in your SOQL statements or SOQL queries that you're doing within Apex. So making it even easier than before, where you had to do a database.query and build that dynamic string off of your Apex data. You can now run distance queries using your geolocation fields and your bind variables that you have from Apex. So we added a couple different ways to be able to run these queries so that you can do that really easily. And instead of just talking about it, why don't I show you what that looks like within my org. So first off, let me pull it up in Salesforce 1. I want to show you what it looks like if I were trying to access one of these maps to find different records nearby to me. So right now I'm going to a tab within Salesforce 1. You can see I opened it right here on the sidebar. It's geolocating where I am initially, but then it's waiting for me to say, what exactly am I looking for? Do I want to find cases, contacts, partners? I'm going to choose contacts, and what that's going to do is it's going to re-render my Visualforce page to be able to show a list of all of the contacts that are nearby to me. And if I were to click into any of these pins, you can see that it has the associated contact data and their phone number if I wanted to call them directly from my mobile device. Now, how was I able to do this? Let me open up my developer console. And what you'll notice about my Visualforce page is, first off, I'm using a standard controller, remove the sidebar header and standard style sheets, and then a doc type of HTML5. I'm using that because I want to be able to use the geolocation API to grab my latitude and longitude coordinates of where I'm accessing this page. Then beneath that, everything is just standard Visualforce. I've added a few style links or style classes and then some HTML around my Visualforce, but ultimately all of this is being done purely with Visualforce and Apex. So I'm receiving my current position, or using that within my map to center the map on where I am right now, grabbed from that geolocation API above. And then within my Apex repeat, I'm filtering through the list that I've grabbed from my Apex class to be able to show map markers and pins for each of those individual contact records that are returned back to my page. But the position for all of these pins is going directly off of those fields from my contacts. Now going over to my Apex class, if you'll notice, this find nearby method isn't remote annotated. I'm doing this purely with the standard MVC paradigm. This could be done with a standard controller or a custom controller, and you can do this very easily with these SOQL statements down here below. So using that location from the lat long that I've grabbed in the JavaScript, I'm able to run this query off of contacts using that geolocation. And while I do have a hard set 7 miles here, because that's how big San Francisco is, you could make this dynamic as well. So super easy. I would say that this is not ideal for mobile devices, even though I showed it in mobile devices, because it does go a little bit slow on load, but it is the fastest way for you to be able to build a mapping component really easily. All right. So a little bit more on what's new with Apex. First off, we've given you the ability to be able to reorder batch jobs in the flex queue using Apex. This is huge. I mean, we've added a few different methods around this. This is just one sample of the few that we've added this release. But if you're creating some large set of data that you're trying to import, and then it affects something that's prior to it in the queue, you can move that up programmatically. And before this, it would have to be an admin going into the setup and changing this around with point and click, but now you can do that yourself in Apex. We've also added the ability to iterate over maps and sets in a way that's now predictable. So when you're creating these maps and sets, you have some idea where these unordered, or they would be unordered traditionally, which are now ordered to be able to iterate through. Then we also have new classes and methods around Apex, specifically to being able to create community and portal users. So this is really useful for self-registration, making it simpler for you to create that on the back end and also be able to send them password and email confirmation upon completion. We have a new search namespace that allows you to perform dynamic SOQL queries with snippets, with the snippets clause, as well as grab more fine-grained sets of data around SObjects and their associated metadata for search. It makes it even easier for you to be able to find, related knowledge articles or suggested knowledge articles. I know that that can be a complicated tree to traverse, but the search method makes that simpler now. Then we also have the data source namespace, and this has been added for the Apex connector framework. So Peter's going to be going over this in a little bit, but basically in the short preview is that these classes enable you to create custom adapters for Lightning Connect, so that they can access data that's stored outside of your Salesforce org. It's really cool stuff. Now, before I send it over to Peter to talk about integration and APIs, I want to talk a little bit about big data and analytics first. First off, we've got a lot of new great stuff in analytics this release. First of all, around iOS and Wave specifically, we've added the ability for you to be able to add data directly from your mobile device using the Wave mobile connector. So what that means is if you have large sets of data, or any set of data for that matter, on your mobile device, you can import it directly from your device on the go. We also have support now for the Apple Watch. So if you're one of the lucky few that was able to get an Apple Watch sooner rather than later, you can download that app right now from the Apple App Store. Or you can go on developer.salesforce.com to read about different ways that you can build your own apps for Apple Watch. And we also had a webinar on that recently. Now, for all mobile users, you have the ability to create and edit dashboards directly from your mobile device, so creating these visualizations on the go. And then also around other various enhancements, we've added a lot of new chart types, including stacked bar for vertical and horizontal bars, compound filters to be able to create those more dynamic filters for these visualizations, and then also from an end user perspective, the ability to easily return back into Salesforce 1 by just double tapping from your Wave app to go back into Salesforce 1. Now, around big data, I want to talk about our BigObjects pilot, which is basically, think of it as SObjects for big data. This is your ability to be able to manage and store large sets of data. And when I say large, I mean like hundreds of millions of records. BigObjects is specifically targeted around things like storing point-of-sale data, like orders and line items, guest relationship data, guest interactions, things like that, and then correlate that process that and correlate that data back with your core CRM data. We also give you the ability to archive your records. So orchestrate those records from production storage back into some sort of archival data store. So to make it easier for you without having to move that data out of Salesforce's trusted platforms. This is also a great way to be able to store large sets of data in their native format. So if you don't necessarily want to convert them first, you can be able to store them in JSON objects or whatever it is that you might be using in your own storage. Finally, the ability to preserve email histories. I know this is something that I have a ton of email history. I can only imagine for our biggest customers what kind of a headache that is to have to preserve it. So this is a great medium for that too. And then finally, you can define your big objects using the metadata API, which then once you've defined them, it can include lookups, your standard and custom SObjects. But once they're defined, you can populate those big objects using the bulk and SOAP API. So a lot of flexibility there. And finally, around big data, we also have our big data pipeline. So think about this as the plumbing for all of the big data transactions. And so this is going to allow you to be able to send big batches of data and help transport that data to your designated context store. Like for example, if you're using Hadoop with Apache Pig scripts, to be able to process that large-scale data that's stored in Salesforce. And so we've now, this release, added more error logging capabilities to help you understand why your jobs might not be executing. And so you can create your own tools using the tooling API, or if you want to just view what's going on right now without having to build anything, you can see that job run information right within the developer console. All right, so talked about big data, we've talked about doing things on the back end and front end. Peter, why don't you tell us a little bit about integration and what's new around APIs?
Sure thing, Sam. So those are some really cool features, and I like a lot of what's going on with big data. One of the things that I think is really exciting is that there are more and more ways that the SObject as an API is kind of getting surfaced in different ways, and certainly the big object is one example of that. but we have some examples of that in integration as well. So let's jump on in and take a look at that. So I want to talk, oops, hit the wrong button. I want to talk, first of all, about Lightning Connect. Lightning Connect is our new integration functionality that we've added to the platform. Lightning Connect has been GA now for at least one release using our OData connector. And now we are adding some additional connectors. There is an Apex connector that allows you to build a custom connection. So this allows you to extend the functionality of Lightning Connect in places that do not support OData as a protocol. Essentially, to implement this, you're going to write a couple of Apex classes that allow your org to connect to the external data source. And then once you do that, you can access that external data just as if it's any other S object. There's another feature to Lightning Connect that we've added called the Salesforce connector. And this allows you to create integrations to other Salesforce orgs. Just like the rest of Lightning Connect, currently this is a read-only feature, but it does allow you to do org-to-org type integrations and even implement kind of a hub-and-spoke type of integration as well, where you have a source org with the primary data model where you'll actually have the actual S objects that are storing the data. And then you can actually create a package that has the external data model, which is a virtualization of that S object in the client org fundamentally. So this is probably going to sound very similar to the Salesforce to Salesforce functionality to some people, but there are some really important differences between these two. So on the left-hand side, you can see kind of how Salesforce to Salesforce works, and on the right-hand side, the corollary way that Salesforce connector works for Lightning Connect. First of all, Salesforce to Salesforce, you are duplicating data using a data sync type of feature. However, in the Salesforce connector, it's a real-time data request with a virtual schema in the client with no duplicate data. In Salesforce to Salesforce, it's a pub-sub type of model. So the primary org or one org identifies data that they want to publish, and then other orgs that are connected with Salesforce to Salesforce can choose to subscribe to that data or not. With the Salesforce connector, because the way that this works is a schema sync. Essentially, we do an inspection of the source org, and then we recreate that schema in the client org. Finally, the way that we do authorization and authentication is very different. With Salesforce to Salesforce, you essentially set up a contact in one org and you invite contact from another org to connect their org. With Salesforce connector, you're using standard Salesforce authorization and security. So you give the client org a username and a password, or they can use OAuth perhaps. And then the user security for objects and fields and for sharing will apply to that user when they connect. So I'm going to do a demo of this and my next feature in just a moment here. But before I do that, I want to talk about a particular API feature, which I think is really exciting. It's a composite REST API request. And there are a couple of these coming online. The first one of these is called batch request. And essentially what this allows you to do is to take multiple requests to the REST API and pass them to Salesforce as a single request. So this allows you to essentially optimize your API request limits. And let's just look at a very simple use case here. On the right of the slide, you see two objects. There's a parent object called program and a child object called offering. And it's very likely that you could have some relationships between these two objects that drive things like roll-up summary fields and formulas. So you might have a use case where you're inserting some data into offering. That causes an update to the parent, and you might want to get that data back out of the parent based on the updates to the child. As of today, the way that you would do this is two separate REST API requests. With the new batch endpoint, you can essentially take these two completely different REST API requests, package them into one single request body, pass that off to Salesforce, and you can get back one single response with individual responses to individual requests sort of packaged up as well. And this is what it looks like. So you're going to make a request to the composite/batch endpoint. And inside the actual request body, you're going to send a JSON structure. That structure is going to contain an array of all the individual requests that you're going to make. And then each individual request can have its own completely different HTTP method, endpoint, data that it's posting, et cetera, et cetera. The response is going to look very similar. There will be kind of a parent value that says whether there are any errors at all. And then there's a results array with corresponding elements in that array for the status of each of the child requests. So this is a really cool feature because it's going to allow people who are writing libraries and writing integrations to essentially do their own bundling of API calls and to do kind of their own orchestration on the client side, which I think it's pretty exciting. But let's actually go and see some of this stuff at work. So I'm going to start by looking at the connect functionality. And let's actually go to a different org right there. Okay. So first of all, I want to talk about the Apex connector. I have kind of a very basic mock-up of an Apex connector just to give you an idea of what the code is going to look like. And so you can get a taste of really how simple the integration is going to be. So in here you can see this sample data source. And the actual type is connected to this Apex class called sample data source provider. Now, if I go and look at that, I'll see that there's a single object that's been generated from that called sample with its own fields and relationships. So this is the way that external objects look. It's an S-object representation. There's a slightly different API suffix on there. But fundamentally, we have Salesforce metadata. The big difference is that this data won't actually be stored in the Salesforce data center, right? It'll be stored either in your own on-premise system, in a different cloud provider, or in the case of the Salesforce connector, obviously, a different Salesforce org. Now, if we take a look at, if we want to take this a step further, we can take this object and make a tab out of it. So we'll go in here to custom tabs, and you'll see that this just gets treated like any other Salesforce object. So there's my sample object. I'll go and pick just some random tab style, and we'll go through the standard wizard steps here to complete that tab. And you'll see here that I now have my sample tab. I can then go in. I can click on my list view, and I can begin to look at data. I can customize this list view. I can customize the layout for this if I want to. It looks and breathes and behaves just like any other Salesforce object, even though there's no data here in the Salesforce org. Now, if we take a look at the actual code behind this, it's a fairly simple implementation. It begins with the sample data source provider, and you can see that essentially we have extended an Apex class called datasource.provider, and we've then implemented or overridden two specific methods. One is get authentication capabilities. This allows us to identify whether this is an anonymous connection, whether we have to provide a single service user for that connection, or whether maybe there's some other supported authentication such as OAuth. In addition to that, any other capabilities that we want to identify, such as is it searchable? Can we go and write SOQL against this? Can we write SOQL? we can implement, we can identify those in the get capabilities functionality. Once we have that, we then go and implement the actual connection class. The connection class is going to extend to data source.connection. And what you'll see is there will be, again, a few methods that need to be implemented. The sync method allows the Lightning Connect functionality that will identify what is the actual shape of the schema that we're connecting to. So what does the data look like? What tables are available? What fields or columns are in those tables? And you can see here we're just essentially mocking up a single table called sample, and we're identifying different columns of that table here. We wrap those up and return those. And when we actually click on the sync button in the Lightning Connect user interface, this is what is going to pop up for us. In addition to that, any functionality we want to implement, such as query, we'd have to write the code for that. Search, again, we'd have to write the code for that. And just to sort of show to lift the skirts and kind of see what this looks like underneath the covers, this is truly just a mock-up of some data. But this get rows method here is being called in the search. In the query and in the search. And if we look at what's going on, we're essentially just putting some data in there. Of course, this is where you actually make the call out to the external data source and provide that data into some kind of structure that would be returned for the query. So that's the Apex connector. For the Salesforce connector, let's just take a look at how this works. Again, I'm in the same org, and some of you might have noticed that there was a second external data source. So if I scroll back down to Develop, External Data Sources, you can see there's one called Another Org. And Another Org is exactly that. So this is my connection to Salesforce. You can see the type is Lightning Connect Salesforce. And what we've done is we've provided the name of a single user. Now, this is where you could either do named principal, which is essentially a service user, or you could use OAuth, where individual users are authenticating. But either way, when that user authenticates, they will have to abide by whatever security policy is in place for their profile, any permission sets they have, and any sharing settings that they have to abide by will also be respected. So in this way, the source org has complete control over the data that's being accessed by the client org. Now you can see that I've already created a few other objects, and just to show you what the sync looks like on a more complex data source, and it will work the same on the Apex connector. When I click Validate and Sync, there we go. So there's all of the objects in that other org. And I'm not going to add anything here. I already have what I need. But I just wanted to show what that looked like. Okay? So the use case that I came up with was, let's say I had a charity or a nonprofit that was providing programs to schools to use for sports programs, after school clubs, maybe faculty training programs, and those charities might be running Salesforce as well. Those schools might be running Salesforce as well, and they could maybe install a package that could go create the connection, create the objects, and create the app. And that's essentially what we have here. So what I have is an app called School Helpers, and that has a single tab called School Programs. And in there, I can see different school programs. So if I click on Go, I'll see a list of all of the programs in the source org. Now, if I switch over to the source org really quickly, there we go. It's right here. And you can see that here's my alter ego, Owen Chittum. I am in a different org. And if you actually pay close attention to the URLs, you see that this is going to look quite different. So when I click on New, we'll say another club and or another program, and we'll save. There we go. And if I go back to school programs, I can see that there it is. And immediately, because we're making a real-time request back to that source org, when I click refresh on my client, I see my another program org. Now, likewise, I can also have child data. So this offerings object is also a child object in that same parent org. And both of these objects have been synced using Lightning Connect. Now, if you recall, I mentioned something about the URLs. Notice here, looks very different from the standard Salesforce URL, and that's because this is my external object URL. So that just kind of gives a little taste of how that works. Let me actually go back to my source org and show you quickly the API functionality that I talked about, which is this batch REST API request. To do this, I'm going to use Workbench. The endpoint, as you saw on the slide, is the composite batch endpoint. And what I need to do is I need to post in my request body each actual individual REST request that I want to make. So here's a get, where I'm going to actually get a particular record. So that's one of my school programs. I'm then posting a new offering. So this is the child data for my school program. So I'm going to add that child data, and then I'm going to request that same school program again, just to sort of see the change that's taken place. And all this is going to take place in just that one single request. Now, I suspect I may have timed out, even though I tried to refresh it midway through the webinar. So I'll attempt to execute, but I may need to log back on because Workbench does like to time out rather quickly. Oh no, there we go. So under results, you can see I have 3 results, and that's my array. In fact, if I show the raw response JSON, you can see there's the results array right there. It looks a lot nicer to look at it here. So I can see there's my first response, and that's a status of 200. And I can see that the roll-up summary fields show the number of offerings, the number of active offerings, and total hours of offerings. I then go in and I add a new offering. And after that, I make a request back to the same one, and I can see that each of those roll-up summary fields has incremented. So in one single request, I've gone and gotten the initial state of my record. I've then modified a child, and I've gotten the changed state of the same parent record. One API request used, much, much simpler on the client side. All right, so that pretty much wraps up everything there. So let's quickly go through and do a big roundup of security and identity. One of the big new features that's available is our extended platform encryption functionality. So this feature is, well, let me step back. We've had the encrypted text field functionality for a long, long time now, as long as I've been on Salesforce, which is close to 5 years. This is a big addition to that, because in the platform encryption functionality, there isn't just one field data type that's encryptable or that's encrypted. You can actually choose any field within the supported field data types, and you can also encrypt files. When these are encrypted, they're encrypted at rest on our servers, and we are actually giving you the control over the decryption of this. Salesforce is going to have one part of the key, and each customer will have their own key that corresponds to that particular Salesforce customer. So in order to actually decrypt any of the data, you have to have both the Salesforce key and the customer key. In addition to that, there's no hardware, no devices to set this up. It's just point and click. But I would strongly recommend that you do a good amount of reading on this to understand the steps. There are certainly some important knock-on effects of how that's going to affect the availability of data. For instance, fields will be encrypted and masked. You can identify which users have access to the encrypted data. However, files are only encrypted at rest. So there are some important little details like that that are in the documentation. Now, I don't think I mentioned this, and it's probably a good time to mention it now. This extended platform encryption feature is a paid license feature. In addition to that, Lightning Connect is also a paid license feature. So when you get your Lightning Connect license, it includes a certain number of Salesforce connectors, and it includes a certain number of Apex connectors. Some other security features, you can configure a longer minimum password of up to 15 characters now. And we're also supporting some advanced networking protocols such as TLS 1.2. As far as authorization and identity, I'm calling it candy here because a lot of this is just about making authorization and identity just much, much nicer for both admins and end users. So one important one is that user provisioning for connected apps is now generally available. What that means is that I can have something like a Google app that is a connected app in my Salesforce org, and I can make it so that when I create a new user in my Salesforce org, I can automatically provision the user in the Google app. So that'll make your onboarding process much, much easier. We're also having connected app-specific session timeouts. So I can configure one connected app to have a timeout of 15 minutes and a different one to have a timeout of 2 hours. And I can have my org session timeout be an hour if I want to. So I can have different session timeouts now for each connected app. We've also added some more flexibility. If you're using Google or LinkedIn as an auth provider, there are some configurable endpoints for those auth providers now. As far as user experience, Candy, what's going to make things nicer for your users? One feature is that you will only have to log in once when you have concurrent connected apps that are using OpenID Connect or OAuth. So what that means is that you won't have to provide your credentials over and over again for each new connected app. On the OpenID Connect provider, you can simply go in and authorize that app using the standard OAuth authorize this app feature. Finally, for logging out, you can have a branded custom logout screen configured for your org. And that pretty much wraps up everything on integration, security, identity, authorization, and all of that. So let me pass it back to Sam here.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Peter, for taking us through that great demo and also giving us the lowdown on integration, security, and identity. I think there is a lot of great new stuff specifically around that came out this release. Well, I just want to cordially thank everyone on the line for joining us today for the Summer 15 webinar. I know that we covered a lot in the last hour, but it is only the surface, tip of the iceberg for what is actually in the release notes. So I would encourage everyone that has to take a developer certification exam or retake their certification exam, developer.salesforce.com/releases where you can find a link to the release notes themselves. We also cherry-picked out the Cliffs Notes that you can read there if you want a little refresher. And then also, if you want to get your hands on these features today, just go to the summer release preview sign-up, the pre-release sign-up, and then you can get your own org to get started before it goes live. And Peter just mentioned the GA feature user provisioning for connected apps. If you are interested in learning more about this, check out our webinar on May 14th to get an in-depth understanding of how it works. And for just miscellaneous platform know-how, I absolutely cannot stop raving about Trailhead. It is my new favorite feature for being able to learn how to build apps on the platform. We've got designated trails for you to be able to follow depending on what kind of an app developer you are, learn all the features of the platform, learn about how they work, and then also get hands-on with different assessments that actually check to make sure that you've built that properly within your developer edition org.
So Sam, have you gotten all your badges yet?
You calling me out, Peter? I have gotten quite a few, but not all of them. How about yourself?
No, I'm probably way behind. It sounds like I don't even have as many as you. But I do have the Catter badge. I'm really proud of that one.
Yeah, I have the Catter badge too. That's the first one you got to get. It's the easy one. All right, and for everyone on the line, I would please encourage you to please fill out our survey. This is the way that we can ensure that we're not only delivering great content, but the content that you want to hear. So please let us know how we did and what kinds of different webinars or content that you'd like to see in the future. All right, so now the floor is open to the live Q&A. Eric, why don't you get us started? What kind of questions do we have?
Sure. So a few questions have come in that I'll kind of summarize here, asking about, does the app builder build apps for desktops or just for mobile devices? So today, the apps that you build in the app builder just run inside the Salesforce One mobile container. Desktop is definitely on our roadmap. It's something that we're hard at work on there, so stay tuned for it. Does Salesforce One fully support Lightning on Android? It's certainly our intent for there to be full support for Lightning on Android. Apps that you build in the app builder do work in Android. There is a known limitation today that Lightning component tabs do not work in the native Android app. So there's still a little bit of work to do, but we definitely do intend to fully support Lightning on the Android version.
So if we build an app today using Lightning App Builder, it will not work on a desktop. Is that the right assumption? And
that's what we're saying. Yeah, that's certainly part of the roadmap there. Exactly.
So there's a few questions here on the batch API. For instance, what's the governor limits for composite batches? Now, this is something that I haven't tested yet, but a single batch request would be one transaction. So if you have two separate things that are triggering two separate triggers, then those governor limits, I expect them to be cumulative. I've not tested that yet, and I've not dug deep into the documentation on that. But that is how it works in the similar feature in Lightning Components has kind of a boxcar feature that's like this, and it's how I expect it to work in this batch API request feature. There are a couple of other things about batches that, I'll be honest, I've just not dug into. These are questions that occurred to me. I just didn't have the time to check them. So what's the number of batches? Can you batch a batch? God, I hope they don't let us do that, but I love our developer community for asking these questions and trying these things. So go check that out, see how that works, and blog about it, what you find, because I don't expect us to allow batching a batch, but I've not tested the maximum number of batches.
Okay, so a couple more questions about deploying apps that you build with the app builder. So question about, can I deploy using change sets or moving from sandbox to production? Absolutely. It fully supports change sets. Apps that you build using the app builder are packageable, so you can actually create both unmanaged or managed packages of them as well if you want to include them in an app you're building. Additionally, there were some questions about the use of Lightning components in communities. There is currently a pilot ongoing as we speak for supporting custom Lightning components in communities. If it's something you're interested in, reach out to your account exec or your partner rep, and we can help get you into that pilot there. There have been some questions about how you get the app builder, and is it something that we're going to have to pay for? Well, I got great news for you. As soon as your org is upgraded to Summer 15, you'll have it. Lightning App Builder is automatically included as part of the platform. It's available in all orgs, Group Edition and higher.
Awesome. I see a question about the maps, which does it have the ability to get a driving distance? And so I don't believe mapping capability has the ability to route you just yet, but there is a Google Maps directions API that allows you to, based off of those geolocation coordinates, really easily map out that route automatically.
So somebody could certainly, it's a great opportunity for somebody to build some exciting components. There's a great opportunity there. I think that, you saw the App Exchange. We're trying to get some more components up there. I'd love to see some exciting contributions from some of the folks on the phone today.
Absolutely. And driving, that'd be useful across many orgs. So if you're building one for yourself, consider posting it onto the App Exchange.
Absolutely. And things you post to the App Exchange can either be free components or you can actually sell them as well. So it's an opportunity to potentially make some money there.
Yeah.
So, question about the Lightning Connect, and is that available today? So, Lightning Connect is GA in Spring 15. The Salesforce connector will be GA in Summer 15. The Apex connector is still in pilot, I believe. So you need to sign up for that one if you want to have access to it.
And I see a question about that Find Nearby and the mapping example. Is it going to be available on GitHub? I am going to blog about it, and I'll create a managed package for it as well as a GitHub repo. That'll probably come out a little bit closer to when the release goes live so that people can install it into their their sandboxes as soon as we switch over to Summer 15. So looks like we're a little bit over, 11:02. So thank you everyone on the phone for joining us today for our Summer 15 webinar.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks everybody.
Have a great day.